Another way to ward off challenges to privilege is by agreeing to talk about gender issues, but only on managerial terms. And that means make sure that discussions of gender get turned into complex, obtuse, obscure jargon. So talk about strategic planning processes to develop a diversity matrix that can be rolled out over the near term to the sectors that are relevant for the key stakeholders. I mean, I just made that up on the spot, but it is bizarre management speak. And in doing that, it completely neutralises the key issue, which is trying to achieve some sort of gender equality in workplaces, in communities, in families. But at the same time it's effective because it sounds, particularly if you're using some of those key managerial words, it sounds like you're taking it seriously. It sounds like you're going to do something quite important about the issue. So clearly using lots of obfuscating corporate jargon can be effective. Another approach is to focus on just the hard facts about gender issues. So demand that there are clear statistics, count things, numbers of men, numbers of women, as though this is some really important measure and way of understanding what's going on. This can be helpful. It can be helpful to understand, for instance, that there's only 2% of women in emergency management. But what counting misses is the dynamics and the power dynamics, and I guess the other things that I've been talking about in this talk. So it's very important to move beyond just the raw counting of data and hard facts. Particularly, some men will say that this area of gender issues can become very emotional and ideological, and therefore we should just focus back on what is real and just focus on these hard facts, not recognising actually the production of facts themselves is ideological, is emotion-laden itself. And what counts as a fact is ideological. What sort of counting one does is also emotional and value-laden. So we do really need to critically look at what we mean when we're gathering quantitative data or we're looking for hard facts in this area. Another strategy that has been used very effectively throughout the Western world, particularly when second wave feminism started to challenge the issues of men's violence against women, the unequal division of labour between men and women, sexual harassment in the workplace, men's sexual objectification of women, the list goes on. One way to diffuse that is to, of course, as I've already said, put in place formal policies and procedures so that it appears you're taking the issue seriously. But the other approach is to neutralise the language and come up with terms like diversity management. So diversity management now has become the dominant term for dealing with and responding to women's claims about inequality. It's a strange term really because you can have a diversity of bathroom tile colours, which might be interesting or might be a nice thing for you in your bathroom, but there isn't a diversity of gender or a diversity of ethnicity. What we actually have is a hierarchy. So the key problem with the diversity approach is that it completely covers up or wipes away the fact that workplaces, communities, our society are hierarchically organised. And they're hierarchically organised, particularly along class lines, that's very clear, by gender, largely by sexuality and very strongly by ethnicity or language background as well. So we can pretend that we are culturally sensitive and we can do cultural competence training, none of which addresses the real issues, which is an imbalance in power. And if we're talking about gender, it's an imbalance in weekly income. In Australia, women's income is still on average for the same work about 18% less than men's income. And that's been stable for about the past 20, 25 years, and it's not looking like changing. So when women say they're cross about that, I think that's fair enough. And diversity management has done nothing to make that change at all. Yet another strategy for warding off challenge to your privilege is present yourself as one of the good guys. Point out that you wear a white ribbon on your lapel, that you're against violence against women by wearing a white ribbon. Even maybe get yourself invited to a white ribbon breakfast and speak up and stand in amongst all of your colleagues and say that you are a white ribbon ambassador perhaps. This is very effective. It demonstrates to everyone that you're someone that cares. And therefore, if you're someone that cares, particularly cares about issues of violence against women, then you shouldn't be someone who's been challenged. It's those other men, the violent men, the problem men. But it also acts to, again, to mask all the other behaviour that's being done, not on White Ribbon Day, that contributes to gender inequality or is quite problematic for women. And there has been some disturbing research, in fact, through extensive qualitative interviews with victims of sexual assault. Not an insignificant number of them actually saying that men, their perpetrators, the men who sexually assaulted them, had aligned themselves with anti-violence campaigns as a way to win the trust of their victims. So this is a very troubling phenomenon that in some ways campaigns like White Ribbon can act as a sort of smokescreen or even a whitewashing, or in the worst cases, a way to disarm women's suspicion about men's behaviour. The value of these sorts of symbolic gestures is they take very little effort. It's usually just a morning breakfast, or it's just a white ribbon on your lapel. Take very little effort and yet reap very large rewards for the man in terms of his status as one of the good guys. I refuse to wear a white ribbon, and I speak out against white ribbon. The penultimate strategy, and by that I mean not the last one, but the one before the last one, is to just make a joke about it. So you make a sexist comment, you make a decision which is not in women's interests, and you just say, look, I just made a bit of a mistake. You know, come on, everyone, I'm only human, everyone's human, and laugh it off. Get away with it. And most of the time, it works for most men. Most men back each other up, and yeah, most men, they admit, oh, I did make a mistake and it's okay. This can be a very effective technique as well. And what we find is that male managers actually make many mistakes, but very few of those mistakes result in them significantly losing their position or their power. Whereas women in positions of management or organisational authority, it's much more common that they will need to be on their guard, to be mistakeless, to be, completely without fault, because our dominant culture says women are not meant to be managers, not meant to be leaders. They're not as rational, they're not as strong as men. And so women in those positions are very aware that they're under scrutiny for making mistakes. So it's not uncommon, therefore, for women managers to be quite strict and sticklers to the rule book in a fairly frustrating way if you're working under her. But we can understand this through a feminist lens as women's ways of coping. On the other hand, men can seem quite relaxed and casual because they feel confident in their position and their privilege, and they know that they will probably get backed up by other men. Another approach to warding off privilege is if a woman or a man in a meeting raises an issue, just interrupt them. Just talk over the top of them. Just cut them short. Very effective technique. Particularly if you're a senior person, you can usually get away with such rude behaviour and no one is going to speak ill of you. I mean, if the worst comes to worst, you can always just leave the room. Or, but interrupting is a tried and tested technique of many men. So the final one, and this can be a very helpful, personally helpful, effective technique for men who are feeling challenged by women in particular, who are challenging them over their behaviour. Say the woman has cleaned the toilet for the 12th time and the man can't even remember the last time he cleaned the toilet. So if she challenges you and says perhaps we could share the task, then just take offence. Get personally hurt by the attack. So any time that a woman raises some concerns about men's behaviour, take it personally, get personally hurt, and maybe even withdraw with that hurt. This is a very effective technique because it really taps into women's guilt about not hurting people and being nice and nurturing. So it's a tried and true tested technique. So if you've had a look at this video, you might want to go back and pick out some of the techniques or strategies that you think you can see around you, and maybe even if you see someone using these techniques, you might want to just send them the link to this video and just point it out to them and see what techniques they're using. The other opportunity you've got, obviously, is to play Avoid the Challenge to My Privilege bingo, where you make a little card up in meetings and watch people in the meeting ward off challenges to their privilege. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks.